Castle of Illusion was a huge success for Sega in 1991, at a time before Sonic would come and kick Sega into the stratosphere. Of course, that meant sequels and spin-offs would soon be in the works, but before the 16-bit version of Castle of Illusion would get any sort of follow-up, the Castle of Illusion on 8-bit consoles would actually be the first one to get any sort of successor. Now, it wasn't a sequel in traditional terms that it followed the story of Castle of Illusion, it was a spiritual successor. It had the heart and soul, but didn't follow the story, it was its own unique game. And that game was Land of Illusion. Now, this actually initially was a Master System PAL-only release, but eventually it came to the Game Gear worldwide. Now, I never played this when it originally came out, but having played it now, I absolutely love this game, and it's one of the best games on the Game Gear, if not the best game on the Game Gear. So, now that we have some time to cover some other Illusion games, let me tell you why, on paper, this might not only be better than the original, but it might be one of the best platformers of the 8-bit era.
The story of Land of Illusion, like Castle, is very basic, but this time doesn't involve rescuing Minnie. Mickey falls asleep reading a book, and then wakes up in a strange village. Here, a version of Daisy Duck asks him to help retrieve a magic crystal that has been stolen by the Phantom, and has drained the happiness of the village away. Mickey agrees to help and sets out on a quest to save the villagers and retrieve the crystal. Land of Illusion offers more of the same 8-bit platforming that Castle of Illusion offered, but adds some elements that lend the game some more meat on the bones. The game now has a map screen, and you are able to move around it and pick from any accessible stage at will. Also, permanent items are acquirable throughout your adventure, which will help you open up other areas of the map, but may require backtracking to previous levels to find new exits or paths. By no means a Metroidvania, it did add a bit more depth to the game at large and made it feel like more of an adventure. The game also added more cutscenes throughout the game, as opposed to just an opening and ending like Castle, to add a bit more story. The game also includes more Disney characters like Daisy, Horace Horsecollar, Goofy, and the main villain Phantom, who may actually be the Horned King from the Black Cauldron, which is a hell of a reference, and it kinda still makes me geek out a bit. The game also includes a longer, more varied game with 14 unique stages, though they are shorter than the castle's longer 5 stages. Bosses continue to be pushovers with simple patterns, but continue to be more fun and unique than the bosses in previous games. The extra puzzle focus is a great change of pace, forcing a bit more thinking and adding a bit more challenge to a relatively easy platformer. Of course, like Castle, the platforming and presentation is still super solid. Otherwise, it's more of what you'd expect from the Illusion series, but given how unknown the 8-bit version of Castle tends to be, this game has been even more missed upon in my opinion, which is truly a shame since the small improvements made this game really stand out as a fantastic adventure. Though Emiko Yamamoto was not involved, the designer of Castle of Illusion, Yoshio Yoshida, took over director duties. Most of the other staff was the same as those that worked on the Castle of Illusion 8-bit ports. One of the new members was a relatively new composer known as Tomonori Sawada, who had just done his first composer and designer gig for Sega on Sonic 2 for the Game Gear. He would later become the sound designer for the entire Panzer Dragoon series, as well as many other Sega titles. Much like Castle, Land of Illusion saw a worldwide release in 1993, a year later, for the Sega Game Gear. Though it plays pretty much the same without much downgrade, given its lack of password system and length, it's certainly not the recommended way, but it's far more accessible to those in non-PAL territories. But even PAL import copies aren't too expensive as of this video, so I totally recommend spending the extra bit and playing this on a good CRT or PVM on a lazy Sunday. However, the last 8-bit follow-up for the Mickey Illusion games does not go out with a bang. 3 years later, in 1995, Aspect, the developers behind many of the Sonic Game Gear games, would get a crack at the Illusion series, with the title Legend of Illusion. This time, the game was made for the Game Gear exclusively, and came out at the same time worldwide. While this game may retain some of the same tropes of the past two, it's clear that the magic was lost somewhere in the switch between devs. In this entry, a dark shadow has been cast over the land, and the terrible King Pete is told he needs to venture to find the legendary Water of Life to heal his land. Pete, being the typical coward he is, makes Mickey honorary king and sends him off to do his job for him. Mickey, being the kind and brave soul he is, clearly takes this task upon himself. This game has some major differences from previous entries. The main change you'll note is that you can no longer bounce on enemies. You must hit them with objects you throw. Also, the game started to focus more on puzzle platforming more so than Castle or Land of Illusion did. The game also does away with permanent items backtracking through old levels of Land, making it a more linear game again, and as such it's a bit shorter than Land as well. While the game isn't offensive by any means, and seeing Mickey in his brave little tailor attire is a cute touch, it generally just doesn't have the same spark that Castle or Land had. The major changes seem kind of pointless. The game feels far easier, and the game just doesn't look as great as the other games, despite coming out far later, though it being developed specifically for the Game Gear may have been a part of this. However, out of all the Sega developed Illusion games, this is easily the weakest, but certainly not the worst Disney game we'll look at, and it's not bad all things considered. However, this game did get a very slapdash port to the Master System in 1998. Yes, in fact, in the one place that loves Sega more than the US or Europe, Brazil. Tectoy, a Brazilian company, pumped out Master System games into the 2000s, and Legends of Illusion was just one of many. However, these ports were usually just slapped on Game Gear ROMs. No upscaling or anything, so it only takes up a small portion of the screen. Given the high cost and rarity, plus the screen size, if you need to play it, stick with the Game Gear. Legend of Illusion isn't a bad game, and it does have its moments and a little more variety than the first two games, but there is just something about it that felt a little too samey, and the things that it did try just didn't make it work the same way as Land and Castle did. That said, if you like those games, you'll still be able to find a good time here. It just won't likely make you go wow like the first two did. However, to most people, the true sequel to Castle of Illusion and the successor on the Sega Genesis was World of Illusion, now starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Though not connected in plot, the game had the same lead designer and lead artist, though this time had new composers. The most important of the two was Tomoko Sasaki. This was her first project with Sega, but as her career continued with them, she would go on to compose the soundtracks to Rystar, voice the adorable goddamn Chows in the Sonic Adventure games, but most importantly did the universally beloved score to Nights into Dreams. Haruo Ogura, the other main composer for World, did much less with Sega, only involving a few Game Gear ports, the generally disliked Golden Axe 3, and another Disney Sega game we'll be checking out in the future. In the meantime, World of Illusion's story is quite simple. In this game, Mickey and Donald are rehearsing for a magic show, when a trick throws Donald off guard and unveils a mysterious box. As usual, Donald sees stardom in his eyes, while Mickey is a bit reluctant. However, Donald goes in anyways and disappears, and Mickey gives follow. There, a powerful figure tells them that they will have to find and defeat him in order to get back home. Much like Legend of Illusion, World of Illusion does play very differently from Castle of Illusion. No bouncing on heads this go-around, just using attacks from your new magical cape. However, some smaller things are noticeable that may not just be related to the mechanics. The game was made much more friendly to newer players. The platforming is much easier, your life bars are longer, the boss fights are shockingly duller, and a lot of the puzzle solving is gone. The game is generally a very simple, linear affair. Also, unlike Castle of Illusion, this one has a lot more passing references to other Disney properties. There are less obvious ones, like a world with very similar art and setting to The Little Mermaid, to the much more blatant Alice in Wonderland, with actual characters and art lifted straight from the movie. Interestingly enough, there is a level that is very similar to a Castle of Illusion level as well, with no real reasoning. To the game's credit, the art is fantastic for the game, but it has lost a bit of its charm moving to a more modern look. Most importantly though is World's biggest addition, co-op. One of the coolest elements to this is, depending on how you play, whether it's single player as Mickey or Donald, or in cooperative, the game is different. Mickey and Donald have different levels in single player, and even the co-op reworks these levels to accommodate the different playstyles. One level has Mickey climbing a mountain full of thunder and lightning, while Donald is forced to ride the river around. In co-op, the section is reworked to force cooperation between the two. This is something neat and gives replay to a game that you can breeze through in about 30 minutes. However, the co-op elements don't really add much more than that. The game doesn't really scale the difficulty for having two players, so bosses are even easier, and you can bring your partner back up if they miss a jump and fall down to a lower level. That isn't to say it's not fun. Having a friend along for the ride always makes the game more fun, but it just doesn't do anything special with it. It's mainly just a bullet point on the back of the box. The game's soundtrack does take a major hit. The change in composers doesn't really work out, and outside a couple of standouts, the soundtrack just sort of blends into the background, with a couple being outright annoying, like the normal boss theme. This in direct contrast to how good Castle of Illusion's boss theme was. Mickey and Donald do have digitized voice in the game, which is kinda neat, and Mickey sounds really solid for the time of the game's release. Donald, however, he isn't doing so well. What Worlds does have over Castle of Illusion is variety. You have flying segments, mine carts, and other little set pieces in between to break up the platforming. However, for me, the big standout for the game is the final level. This part really reminds me of the creativity of the original game. The music is fantastic, the stage design is fun, it has a cool boss rush style part before it that takes you through the best parts of previous levels, and the final boss is really cool and has some fantastic music. Though he's a bit of a pushover, much like the rest of the bosses, which takes a bit of the awe away, but not a lot. Of course, beating Pete, you're the villain as opposed to the random new character that they made for Castle of Illusion, sends you home and you put on a fantastic magic show for the entire crowd. By no means bad. Having played through it again, World of Illusion is a bit on the weaker side of the series, and while I liked it better than Legend of Illusion, it just couldn't match the lofty goal of being the 16-bit sequel to Castle of Illusion. It's too easy, the game just doesn't feel as inventive and creative as the Castle of Illusion, and just generally there was something missing about the other game that just wasn't captured here, and it also didn't have the bigger depth and the bigger mindset that Land of Illusion had on the Game Gear and the Master System. Both of those games are phenomenal, and it's hard to live up to that, and it's not like World of Illusion didn't try. It just couldn't hit the same exact notes as well as they did. But it's still a great game to check out if you're into Disney, or you like a good platformer, or if you like co-op. It does have great things to offer. Just don't go in expecting something as good as Castle or Land.
World of Illusion is a good game, but it's just not as good as Castle of Illusion, which is amazing. Or even Land of Illusion, which is one of the best platformers on any 8-bit system ever. But it's still good. Maybe it hasn't aged as well as those games, but it's still a fun time, and it's still worth checking out. But you see, in the meantime, even though we may be done with the Illusion series in name, the Illusion team was making some other Disney games in the background as well. Starring, funnily enough, this duck right here. Now, the crazy thing is, the true, real, amazing successor wasn't starring Mickey at all. In fact, it was Donald who got the true, amazing sequel to Castle of Illusion. And we'll be talking about that one, plus his 8-bit outings, on the next episode.
Hey guys, thanks for watching as always. If you missed the first episode on Castle of Illusion, you can click the video up on the top left. If you haven't seen the newest episode that we put up about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie games, you can click on that video on the right. It's good to be back on track and having some new stuff out here, and there is some big cool stuff I got planned that's going to be up real soon. So hopefully you guys will be here to come with this journey on me. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys then.